How are you guys? Good? All right, so I'm talking about Buenos dias, Buenos Aires. It's really good to be here. My name is Daniel Burwen. It's an honor to be speaking here today. Thank you to Damien and the rest of the MEDIAMORFOSIS crew. I'll do my best to talk slowly because some of you might not speak English, which is fine. I'm very caffeinated right now, so I own that. If you want to follow along on Twitter, you can tell me that I have great ideas or terrible ideas, but either way, I love the internet, so feel free to use that. So a little bit about my background. So I come from a pretty diverse array of professional pursuits. I've worked in AAA games. I've been a consultant for Walt Disney Imagineering and Lucasfilm on new forms of media. I've done immersive retail experiences with like Kinect and interactive touchscreen stuff. I've worked for Sony on new media interfaces for some of their hardware. And for 2 years, I was the director of experience at Jaunt VR, which some of you guys might have heard of. Anyone here heard of Jaunt by any chance? Handful of you guys. So Jaunt was a pretty well-known VR startup, raised a lot of money, tried to figure out how to make that work. And I've also been a consultant. I've worked with Here Be Dragons. Some of you might have heard of them. So I currently run a consulting group called Adjacent. And I would say the core purpose of Adjacent is to bring design thinking into the storytelling space with the intention of making immersive content production more painless and more effective. So we want to see better results with that. So in terms of that, themes for the talk today, I'm going to be focusing on 2014 to 2016. And a lot of you guys are probably wondering, why are we talking about 2014 to 2016 when it's 2018? Well, you know, we saw a lot of challenges coming out of the first wave of consumer VR. And the landscape was really tumultuous and fast-moving at that time. And I believe that it's very important for us to take a moment to reflect on the lessons we learned and pass them on to future generations. So my hope is that from this talk today, somebody out there, whether it's in this audience or on the web, takes something of value from this and learns from it and does better, because we really need to do better in the future. So on that note, in terms of the things we'll be covering today, we'll really be sort of talking about sort of 5 key areas. We'll start by looking at the evolution of media through 3 timelines. We'll talk about the culture challenges between technology and media companies coming together. We'll look at the different types of creators that were pioneering VR at the time. Then we'll look at how to bring those creators together into new types of creative teams. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about process in terms of how those teams can do better in terms of working together. And just for the sake of language, things change a lot in this space. So XR is now the new term for, you know, all the Rs. So XR and VR are essentially an interchangeable term. So when you see XR, it's VR. We see VR, it's XR. It's all the same thing. All right. So let's start with a quick lens for looking at the evolution of media. I tend to break the evolution of media down into 3 topics: mediums and formats, technology, and audience behavior. So a little bit about medium and format. So highly abstracted timeline, not anything new, right? Gutenberg printing press in the 1400s, many, many decades and centuries of evolution, eventually radio, TV, video games, etc. I think the point I'm trying to make here is that a lot of the formats that we use today for our media has evolved over a very long time. It takes a long time for things to emerge, mature, and offer some form of value that we then can monetize. These things just didn't appear out of nowhere. They take time to evolve. Now, by contrast, immersive media is just like this tiny blink. It's just a little slice of time. So it hasn't been very long. So next, let's take a look at how technology has evolved within this blink of time. So I'm sure anybody who's been to like a conference remotely related to immersive media has seen the obligatory, like, things are changing timeline, and these are all the hardware, right? So I won't spend too much time on this, but there's been a lot of change in a very short period of time. You know, we have like cardboard box with a phone to like plastic box with a strap to I can move around and use my hands to I have an interface and I can see, you know, content overlaid over the world, right? So we go to like dorky visor and then ugly glasses and hopefully one day maybe sexy glasses. That'd be kind of cool. And then of course we're gonna have like cyborg contact lenses and God knows what else. So it's getting weird really fast. But the point I'm trying to make here is that we went from a cardboard box on our face to like these awkward, dorky looking glasses in 5 years. That is a lot of change very quickly. Not just technologically speaking. The amount of technology it takes to go to like a fully spatially tracked, you know, overlay of information is dramatic and impressive as it stands, but the user experience of that and the content you can make because of that are vastly different. And I think one of the challenges we faced as media creators is that we don't have any stability inside of this landscape. Like, we're trying to build something and then it moves and you're like, oh no, I was just trying to, okay, no more 360 video, I'm on to like AR now and whatever else. So we don't really give creators a chance to like, to master these new tools. And I think the other side that is affected by that is, of course, how audiences are interacting with this stuff as well. So just to sort of look at a rough outline of how audiences have evolved over time. So, basically everyone should be familiar with like, the different sort of delineations. The most notably being probably Generation X, Generation Y, Millennials, and of course Centennials. And the reason why there's a Gen Y Millennial divide is because of the consumer internet, right? Everyone should probably remember their first experience online. For me, I was like 13, 14 years old, and AOL had come along, and there was like dial-up internet, and I was like chatting with like, people on the internet. That was new for me. So you have a generation before, 2 generations during, and 1 generation after the web became a mature force. And the web dramatically changed media in terms of how we interact with it. Specifically, I'm talking about these guys. How many people here have heard of the term Centennial or Gen Z? A couple of you guys. Okay, this is really important to pay attention to. These guys are really different from the millennials that came before them. They grew up with a smartphone basically in the palm of their hand. They're used to ubiquitous internet. They don't even know that the internet didn't exist before. Like, they're truly native to it. And because the mobile phone, the smartphone, is their primary way of communicating and creating media, they kind of shirk prior platforms. So they're not really on Facebook or email or television, and they're constantly on SMS, or they're on YouTube watching influencers, or Snapchat or Instagram. You ask a Centennial what they want to do when they grow up, and most of them will say influencer, which is totally weird. Not doctor, lawyer, scientist. No, they want to be popular on the internet, so kind of crazy. So these timelines, they converge, and out of that convergence, new things emerge, right? We've been seeing this happen for a long time, of technology, media, and audience kind of coming together, and new things kind of come out of that in unexpected ways, and sometimes these things actually mature and endure. Inside of what was happening in VR Wave 1, this has been happening for a while now, but in 2014 to 2016, we got our first major convergence emergence moment for consumer VR. So in terms of what those factors actually look like, everybody was using a smartphone, right? This is a thing that was common now in our society. The platforms on those smartphones was Facebook and YouTube. Those platforms started supporting 360 video. And the first offering of consumer headsets came on the market. So you could watch these 360 videos in VR. And the hype cycle was in full swing, right? Everyone remembers this horrible thing? Yeah. So anyway, that is what I'm calling consumer VR Wave 1. You guys with me so far? This is making sense? Okay, yeah, all right, well, we're gonna keep going. So the story of Wave 1 starts with a conversation around cultural difference, right? 360 video is a natural first step for the medium. It worked well with mobile phones, and so a lot of people were asking, how do you tell a story in VR? How do you do that, right? Because filmmakers are like, ooh, that's new, I wanna go do that, right? And so to answer this question, the geeks in Silicon Valley turned to Hollywood to help them figure it out. It's not the most natural pairing, it turns out. Our cultures are very different. And by way of example, how many people here have heard of Conan O'Brien? It's an American television personality. Anyway, he left The Tonight Show, his TV show, in 2010, and he came to visit the Google campus, trying to sort of figure out, I think, his next step in his career. Here's a short clip of how that went.
Who the hell are you?
Well, welcome to Google.
Welcome to Google.
It's absolutely great to have you
Very
here.
nice that you could be here.
Yeah,
this is
thank
exciting.
you. Thank you.
People are so thrilled to see you.
Yeah, I noticed that.
What a rare honor for them to see you in the flesh.
Yes, on behalf of all the Googlers, let me express
You call
a very
yourself
warm welcome.
Googlers? Is that
We
it?
do. We do. Aren't we Googlers?
Let's address
yes,
that.
Googlers? Yeah.
Now, let's start there. We can do better than Googler, okay? We need something cooler, especially for the guys when they're walking into a bar. You know what I'm saying?
What would you suggest?
I'm a Googler. you don't have to say that to like I'm a G-man or something. You got to get something else going, because Googler.
Well, welcome.
Well, we're pretty much done here, aren't we?
We are done. We are done.
You seem stunned and unhappy.
Yes. So.
All right. That wasn't awkward at all. That video is an hour long, and I recommend watching it. It's very entertaining. But basically, to sum that up, these two people have very different approaches to how they talk and how they interact. And we'll see that trickle down to also how they look at value and how they make things. So for a long time, the world of technology and media didn't really cross over that much. You had a TV, you had a box in your living room, you had a box in your office. One was for watching, one was for doing. Our worlds are pretty far apart. And over time, we've seen these two boxes merge together. So in 2007, Netflix launches its streaming service, and then that accelerates sharply in 2013 when Netflix developed its first slate of original IP. So Netflix was launching original IP to attract subscribers to its platform, and this was a fundamentally different business model from traditional film and TV. So what we were witnessing was the birth of subscription video on demand, or SVOD platforms, right? And now we have Hulu and Amazon, and all these other people are following suit. This convergence of tech and media is actually getting a lot more intense, as evidenced by the centennials earlier with the smartphone. And so these devices have completely changed not only how we interact with media, but also how we interact with each other and basically everything else. So essentially, we've gone from this to this. And I think what's been driving this change in audience behavior is this concept around content, right? Which for some of you is kind of an icky word, content, right? People don't like that word very much. Because content is different than media, right? Like we used to pay for media with money, and we had names for different types of media, right? We had like music and games and movies and TV shows and books. But in the age of the smartphone, it's all just content, right? And instead of money, we pay for it with our attention, and more we're paying for it with our attention. And we've really entered an economy of attention now, and content is the fuel for that, right? It's the fuel of the attention economy. Another way to parse the media content divide is the concept of publisher versus platform, right? So you've got like publishers on the left, platforms on the right. Should make a lot of sense there, right? Another way to dig in a little bit deeper to that is that Hollywood really sees content through the eyes of a publisher. So it's highly curated, it's high production value, it's based on established IP, and we pay for these subscriptions with money, right? SVOD services, they're only as good as their libraries. Silicon Valley, on the other hand, sees content through the eyes of a platform. So content is that fuel for the eyeballs, that fuel for the attention economy. It's paid for with data, right, or ads, or both, and it's really about volume, not quality. So these platforms are only as good as the time that you spend on them, right? They're only as good as the attention you give them. That's all they want from you. So for me, I see the difference between platform and publisher as a matter of how audiences use technology to access content. So creators will publish and reach an audience through this lens as well. And that takes us to the different types of creators, right? And how they publish and share their work with the world. So let's take a little bit of a closer look there. So I break creators down into three main demographics. We have avant-garde, early adopter, and mainstream. To go a little bit more sort of in detail on that, so the mainstream uses traditional publishing models and formats to reach mass consumer audiences. Early adopters, they're the indie guys, right? So they reach an early adopter audience, typically through emerging platforms. And the avant-garde, the fine artists in the bunch, oh, I love those fine artists. They're typically, they're creating art for patrons of festivals and conferences, right? That's what motivates them. For simplification, I like to think of these three different demographics as like a train going down the tracks of time. So the avant-garde is like leading the charge with experimentation and converging like crazy, and constantly like things are emerging out of that. Early adopters are then translating some of those things that emerge into something scalable for the mainstream. And the mainstream is essentially waiting for things to make money, or a return on investment, ROI. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at these guys. All right, avant-garde. So the avant-garde wants to push the furthest boundaries possible of technology and art. They're happy to show in galleries and film festivals and museums. Their stuff is far away from what consumers can actually purchase and experience in their homes. And they're really interested in shaping culture rather than developing a mature commercial industry. So they're really motivated by gaining prestige and influence within the immersive media community, not profit. Tribeca and Sundance have been some of the most celebrated showcases for the avant-garde, at least in the States. This is where you get to see the absolute cutting edge in experimentation between art and technology. And these events are really exclusive, so you're lucky, if like a few hundred people come through here and actually get to see your work. And mostly the audience who does that are other members of the avant-garde. So if there's like some cool new technology to play with and try making media out of, avant-garde's gonna be all over it. So some of you know, VR first came to Sundance this way in 2012, so not that long ago. It was a full room-scale system from the Mixed Reality Lab at USC. Worth noting, that's actually where the Oculus Rift originated from, kind of cool. And if you're lucky enough to actually get out and experience these pieces of work, they can be really profound and powerful. Tree on the left here uses all sorts of extrasensory gizmos and whatsits to make you feel like you're actually embodying a tree. There's like fans for wind, and there's like misters, right? And there's like a vibrating vest, and there's like other 4D effects. It's really powerful. And then Draw Me Close on the right, this was a collaboration with the London Theatre Company. And it actually had a live actor in the scene with you as an avatar interacting. And in part of the experience, they give you a hug. And it was like completely profound. It was so cool. So really powerful, obviously does not scale. But that's the nature of the work with the avant-garde, right? They really want, that's how that works. All right, so early adopters. So these guys are actually interested in a sustainable career and mattering to consumers as a result of that, right? So they're very much interested in pioneering something new and like catching that next wave. So they're really taking a bet on the future to hopefully profit later on when these things mature into something that makes money. So they're sort of the emergence maturity part of that, and they do care about making money. They believe in the internet as a means of distribution, so they iterate quickly, and they're highly knowledgeable, and they're happy to share their info and learnings online. So they use the web to build an audience, and they also use the web to participate in online communities. They're scrappy and they're experimental, and they're really quick to learn new tools and workflow, but they typically lack access to high-end equipment. So their output can lack visual polish. It's usually not the best-looking stuff. In Wave 1, inventive and noteworthy techniques in grammar for 360 video was largely coming from these guys. So they're the indie side of the creative community, and occasionally you'll find a diamond in the rough with them. All right, mainstream, established filmmakers. So Doug Liman, if you guys have heard of this guy, he directed the Bourne series and Go and Swingers and Edge of Tomorrow. Pretty big deal director, and he was part of the Invisible series at Jaunt, which is like a highly funded 360 video thing we did. Creators like Doug Liman, they apply filmmaking as their basis for process, philosophy, and creative approach. So their career is probably already established, and they have a reputation to maintain. So not fully committed to VR yet, and not incentivized to take risk. So they're the lifeblood of the publisher model for media, and they're really big budget film and TV. So coming from that industry, they're great with scripts and actors and lighting and production and engaging the Hollywood business structure. These are all really highly valuable skills for creating compelling 360 video content, and they carry cachet with funding companies as well. So that was why they were able to pull a lot of weight there. But there's some caveats with these guys. Established filmmakers have never forged entirely new storytelling grammar because they're typically ignorant of the techniques and approaches coming from the software side in Silicon Valley, like user experience or game engines or software development or creating a minimally viable product or user testing or iterative design or data. All of these factors that are more and more becoming critical to the future of immersive media. So VR is not their chief focus. It's something they do as a new or side interest. And their time can be expensive, might not be available. So through that lens of converge, emerge, and mature, it took 60 years to go from the horse in motion in 1878 to Citizen Kane in the 1940s. That's 60 years for the grammar of film to reach maturity, and that happened almost 80 years ago. So it's a long time. So I think the point I'm trying to make here is that people working in traditional film and television today have inherited a mature industry. They didn't have to build it from the ground up necessarily. So to sum it up, avant-garde, motivated by influence and prestige at the front of the train, constantly forging ahead with experimentation. Work is then picked up by the early adopters and iterated and refined into something scalable for mass market consumption by the mainstream. So I think of the train kind of traveling down the tracks of time, right, constantly passing knowledge back. So things start out as custom and handmade at the front and then eventually become mature. And 360 video went through this as well. We used to tape together a bunch of GoPros, and now we have dedicated cameras for that. We used to have to stitch by hand, and now, of course, Adobe's products support this out of the box. So it turns out that to figure out how to actually make this content and the new business models that are going to support it, you need to incorporate every part of the train. So that's what we're going to talk about next. Okay, so now that we have defined the different types of creators, let's talk about how we harness their strengths to build effective teams. So let's start by maybe defining what success would look like for that team. So 360 video, dominant format for Wave 1. Let's create a lens for that. Okay, so in my philosophy, there's 4 elements that make up a successful 360 video. Obviously story, pretty universal, right? Is there a narrative arc of some sort, plot, characters, acting, etc.? IP and subject matter. So given the high friction nature of using a head-mounted display of any sort, audiences need to be motivated to go there. So Intellectual property with a pre-existing audience can be really helpful, like with recognizable actors and characters, and bonus points if those actors or characters are active on social media because, hey, that's where the centennials are, and they're probably following influencers more than mainstream creators. And then, of course, grammar, right? So the language of storytelling for the medium. So if you're using a 360 camera as a VR device, are you actually like using it intentionally for its purpose, or are you just shooting like you would a traditional film? So grammar can be tricky there. And then lastly, technical quality, right? So quality of the video, quality of the sound. Stitch lines were a massive issue early on, and so we wanted to make sure that, like, is this a cleanly stitched video? Is the audio spatialized and all around you? Is the imagery stereoscopic? Is its frame rate decent? So on and so forth. Pretty straightforward. So in order to cover all of these elements, this is how you bring the front of the train and the back of the train together. So typically coming from the world of big budget established media, the mainstream creator is really strong with story and established IP. And the avant-garde and early adopter guys are really good with grammar of the medium and technical workflow, and maybe some other key specialized knowledge. So let's look at a couple of examples where these guys actually came together and made stuff happen well. Anybody heard of the Always Sunny Project Badass 360 video from Jaunt? All right, well, it's an American TV show and basically pretty popular. And we were able to pair the showrunner, Rob McElhenney, who obviously is great at story and established IP, with Patrick Megan, who was working at Jaunt. He was one of our directors there. And Patrick really understood how to work with 360 video as a medium. So these guys were able to really cover that, and it was one of our most successful pieces. Mr. Robot, anyone heard of this show? A couple more of you guys. Okay, cool. So basically, Sam Esmail, showrunner, paired with Justin Denton at Here Be Dragons, again, able to cover that train and bring the knowledge of the show and the knowledge of the medium together to do something greater than the sum of its parts. So during Wave 1, I watched a lot of 360 video on behalf of Jaunt as part of my duty for the company. Hardly any of it was able to nail all four of these elements. You'd see really strong stories with weak grammar or bad technical quality, or you'd see gorgeous footage that was perfectly stitched and no story. It's hard to get all of these things into one piece of content. These are few and far between, but even if you do manage to pull that off, it's not enough with emerging formats. You're going to have to think about how to bring this content to market and potentially monetize it as well. So how to go from emerged to mature, right? And this is not obvious when the behavior for consuming that content is new and foreign to audiences. And with emerging formats, this is often the challenge. It's on some new cool piece of hardware that most people don't have, or it requires behavior that we haven't learned yet. So it's not just about creating content, but also building essentially an entirely new industry around it at the same time. So where are audiences today, you might ask? Well, they're all over the place. HMDs are not ubiquitous yet. Nobody is consuming VR on a regular basis as part of their daily habit. And even if they were, HMDs are hard to use with other people in social settings. Like PlayStation VR, probably the most accessible 6DoF headset, is awkward, right? You're gonna sit there on the couch with your friends, you're like, yeah, this is cool, right? This is normal, just, it doesn't really work yet. So, because audiences are spread across all of these crazy things, immersive content requires strategy to plug into and embrace an expanding ecosystem. Because audiences more and more are seeking content across all of these things. So during Wave 1, we didn't really think of VR content as multi-platform. We treated it like traditional media, and that didn't really work. So successful content of the future, agnostic of what format it is, will be multi-medium, multi-format, and work on multiple platforms. Some Wave 1 content followed this approach. People here heard of Pearl by Google Spotlight Stories? Okay, worth checking out. This is a gorgeous piece of content. It was one of the most successful pieces from that time for a couple of reasons. It's a beautiful animated short, father-daughter relationship. It cuts through time, and your vantage point is always in the passenger seat of this vehicle all around you, so you kind of stay framed. It was really good with grammar. It was really well executed. And for what it was, it did really well. It was originally authored in a real-time game engine, so they then ported it to the Vive, and you could move around and kind of break it if you wanted to and stick your head outside the car. They then baked from that engine into a 360 video that you could watch on YouTube on your smartphone or in a Google Daydream or whatever. And then they converted and edited that video into a traditional short film for mass consumption. And as a result, this non-XR format of Pearl was nominated for some major film industry awards, and actually won a Creative Arts Emmy. So there's a lot of power in being able to take your IP and move it into all these different places. So to succeed, we need to go further than just creators and content. We really need to harness the attention where it is today across all of these different platforms. And that requires strategy and it requires planning. So in short, to develop emerging formats, you need a new process, right? You need to find the form of the content, but you also need to find a business model. And you need to create that harmony. So what is this process, you might ask? Well, funny you should ask that. So, essentially, I think we might have some insights on that. As you can imagine, Hollywood and Silicon Valley traditionally have been very far apart from each other when it comes to how they make things, right? Film and software are very different beasts. And at its core, I think the difference in our points of view boils down to how we view and handle risk and failure. So film and TV can operate a lot like a car assembly line, right? Big budget media projects take many years, they cost lots of money. So as a result, slates of content are lined up well in advance, and projects are kind of difficult to change once that train is in motion, right? Once a film is cut and released, it's kind of done, right? There's not a lot of iteration. And so it's kind of up to that opening weekend and Rotten Tomatoes to determine your fate, and you kind of hope for the best, and if it works out, awesome. If it doesn't, I don't know, right? It's not very good at that. So, success in this model is hit-driven, and failure is expensive, both in terms of time and money. And if you fail too many times as a filmmaker, you're not really given a lot of extra chances after that, so it can result in a failed career. So in this environment, it's hard to take risks on new ideas. And we see a lot of repeating of established IP and the same ideas over and over again. So we get ideas that are generic, predictable, and very safe. In Silicon Valley, our process is iteration-driven. So failure is like this necessary step to learn and move towards future success. So we're constantly releasing things that are broken or inefficient or fail. And we presume that when you fail, you're going to learn something valuable, and you're going to use that to iterate forward. So we make use of failure. So it's like release, measure, update, repeat. So we see this with platforms, we see this with games. It's a constant cycle of iteration. And with the car analogy, this approach of embracing failure and iteration, it allows you to build entirely different kinds of vehicles than one might have thought of originally, or completely rethink how transportation works in the future. I think we're at a cultural moment now where we have to rethink how entertainment is going to work in the future. This conversation's been going on for a while. It's one of the reasons why Conan was at Google in the first place. And I think this attitude towards failure and iteration is really at the heart of the conversation between Silicon Valley and Hollywood right now. So when punished, failure results in a lack of change and an aversion to risk. And when it's embraced, it's a critical learning tool that results in rapid iteration and potentially massive disruption. So to build media for the future, we need a new process that accounts for failure as part of the strategy. So let's look a little bit more about that sort of format versus process to kind of set that up. So essentially, there are like new media formats, there are old media formats, and then there are new processes and old processes for creating those formats, right? So in traditional media, it's very mature, it's very back of train. We have a very established format for that. Then Netflix introduces a new way to make and distribute that old format and causes massive disruption with SVOD, and now that's the business model, right? With 360, we went to back of train creators and mindset to try to make a new format. Did not work. So for a new format like immersive media, we need a new process, and we call this Lean Studio. So what is Lean Studio, you might be asking? Well, we know there's a lot of critical knowledge being generated at the front of the train by the avant-garde. Those guys are experimenting and learning all sorts of really valuable lessons every day. But it's not obvious how to take those lessons and embrace them and translate it into something mature that can actually make money, right? So Lean Studio is trying to fill in that kind of middle car for kind of streamlining the process for capturing and disseminating that knowledge to accelerate and formalize a development process and to create maturity for these new forms of content that can actually be consumed by the mainstream. So let's dive into this sort of at a high level. So traditional formats like film and television, the format and surrounding business model is well established. It's kind of like a waterfall, right? You just kind of go through your steps. You might have a little bit of iteration in the script and pre-production phase. You might maybe do some audience testing and revise in the edit, but essentially live action as a medium is difficult to iterate, and it has a well-established path to market. Lean Studio aims to go through all of those steps of a traditional media project in an iterative loop as fast as possible and study the outcomes and repeat. Because not only is the format unknown, but the path to market is kind of a big mystery, right? So you're not just iterating content as you go, you're potentially iterating an entire industry. So high level, Lean Studio, your goal is to maximize the knowledge you're generating for as little time and money as possible. You have a creative idea that you want to prototype. You have a new technology that you want to apply to that prototype to create the idea. You need to establish a workflow to use the technology to make the prototype. You need the right team to do all of this. That's a really big one. Like being locked into some big budget media project and you're having like clashes in your team because you've never had these people work together before. Very risky as well. So you want to prototype your team structure if you can. And then you also need to test out, well, what are the platforms this is going to go to and how do I distribute it? And then you need to get a sense of market fit, right? So you don't need to test for all these things at once, but you can intentionally test for a few at a time in a strategic and ongoing manner. Does that make sense? This is a big, if you're going to take a picture of a slide, this is the money shot right here. So, so if you look at like big budget film and TV as a single block of time and money, it's hard to split it up, right? It's really only so granular you can go in your production process, and success is far from guaranteed, right? Film and television is a risky business. With new forms of content, I would argue that you can divide that same block of time and money into like smaller pieces and achieve better results and try to move towards something iteratively that's going to emerge and actually work for you, right? So let's say you make 10 films as a slate, right? They take a long time to make, they're expensive, and each one carries a high risk of failure. I'm told approximately 8% of all television pilots actually make it to season, and only 15% of those actually make it to a second season. So that's not a lot. At the end of making 10 films, if you haven't gained much knowledge, it's because the industry is mature and you're not going to learn much from that. But in Lean Studio, you can do like a bunch of prototypes, right, for maybe like 2 weeks, and you can like set up a bunch of teams and try a bunch of stuff. Some of those teams are going to work out, some won't, but you're going to learn a lot. And then you can take the examples that worked, maybe there's like 2 out of 15, and you can like replicate that structure, add some more time, add some more money, and start to like slowly ramp up your production and your investment until you get to something that can actually work. And instead of doing this over the course of like months or years, you can do this over the course of days or weeks. So it's very fast. And I think the critical difference here is that you remember how fast technology is moving? It's moving really fast, right? So we need a production process that can keep up with the pace of innovation and change. So this is a really critical difference. Like the mindset of I'm going to make a film and it's going to take me like 4 years does not work with immersive media because you were building for cardboard and now everyone's focused on AR. Not going to work. All right, we're almost done here, guys. So final thoughts. Covered a lot. I talk really fast. I hope everyone's able to kind of follow along with me. Just to recap some of our main points. We created a lens for looking at the evolution of media through a concept of convergence, emergence, and maturity. We looked at the bias between tech and media through the lens of publisher, platform, and the attention economy. We defined 3 creative mindsets of avant-garde, early adopter, and mainstream. We looked at how to combine these different creator mindsets into an effective team, and then figure out how to craft content that is multi-medium, format, and platform. And lastly, we looked at Lean Studio, the mindset of prizing and pursuing knowledge first and revenue second as a strategy for immersive content development. So what about Wave 2, you might be asking? I mean, it's 2018. What's happening now? Well, Wave 2 is happening. It's ramping up. It's consisting primarily of location-based entertainment and a lot of hype around AR. We've seen full-featured, free-roam multiplayer VR experiences starting to come online. Disneyland just launched the Star Wars Void experience, which is super cool. So if you get a chance to check that out, highly recommend. Dreamscape launched Alien Zoo. They're going to be launching their full slate later this year. And Magic Leap finally released their ugly glasses, and people are underwhelmed. Not going so great so far. But to talk about technology, I think is a bit of a misguided conversation at this point. We led the conversation of Wave 1 with technology, and we've learned since then. To understand where this medium is going, we need to be looking at where the audience is going, specifically centennials. There's a simple rule of centennials, and this is like my takeaway, like the quote, right? If they get it and you don't, it's probably the future. So remember that smartphone from Wave 1? What do Facebook and YouTube, these 2 platforms fundamental to Wave 1, represent at their core? Just think about that for a second. What do those platforms represent? You get to make and share content in a participatory fashion, right? It's social, and you can make stuff. You can express yourself. So it's really about making stuff together. And this participatory model works extremely well outside of immersive media. Minecraft, you might have heard of, right? Huge. You get to like share and build your own worlds. Battle Royale Fortnite, you guys heard of this game? This is the biggest game in the world right now. How many people here have heard of Fortnite? Yeah, all the hands go up. I ask about Pearl, I ask about, no one knows these things. I ask about Fortnite, woof, right? This is huge, right? So what is the participatory platform for XR? I'll give you a hint, it's not Facebook. It's this thing. Who here has heard of VR chat? Oh man, okay. This is crazy town. This is the thing. It's multi-format, it's multi-medium, it's multi-platform. You can use it in VR with a Rift and a Vive and be fully embodied and talk to people. You can drive it with your mouse and keyboard like a regular PC game. You can watch people play it on Twitch and YouTube. Most importantly, you can build your own stuff in VR chat. You can make your own worlds, your own characters, your own experiences using Unity. It is completely democratized, and the result is crazy town. It is a crazy place. It is racist there, it is offensive there, and it is incredibly popular. There are more concurrent users in VR chat than any other immersive platform today. And to be fair, it's actually not, it's not all terrible. There's one very important thing to note about VR chat. It's multi-IP. This is a remix of the internet on steroids. And some of the things that we're seeing here are kind of beautiful and pretty. This is a music video made by VR chat users. Everything you're seeing are people acting it out and recording it. And, you know, it's kind of like this beautiful, fun collaboration of people making worlds and making avatars and performing together. It's like immersive theater in the future. And if you look at the credits of these things, you can see, like, these are all the VR chat users that participated in this, this video. So we're starting to see crazy media convergence come out of VR chat, like when you mash up VR chat with Rick and Morty and a world-famous DJ. You have deadmau5 doing a New Year's countdown with Rick and Morty being live broadcast from VR chat into the stadium with people actually acting out the avatars to Justin Roiland, the creator of the show, speaking over it. Kind of nuts. People love this. This is like the perfect intersection of these weird cultures. I think that when completely random and unknown people become celebrated, the true potential of the medium is unleashed. So I'm going to end with something that you're about to see. It's a video made by a famous Twitch streamer who befriends an innocent child in VR chat and documents their adventures together and then edits it and puts it up on YouTube. And with that, enjoy.
Okay, I'm going to let you decide which one do you want to be.
You're gonna, okay, I get to decide, Jordan? Okay, I'm gonna go on the, be on the red team, Jordan.
And Charizard's here.
Yeah, Charizard's here.
The water Charizard. Charizard and Risky Biscuit go on
You got,
Sheriff's side.
oh, now we gotta see
Just
who this
leave
guy
this
is.
guy out.
Just leave this guy out? Okay.
Can someone hit star? I can give you a weapon.
Oh, thank you, Jordan.
So you want to grab a bomb?
You wanna grab a bomb? Okay.
Go up here.
We go up here, okay.
And then just chuck it.
Oh, damn. Oh, man.
And that could have killed someone.
Okay. Pro strats with Jordan. What next, Jordan? Where are we going? Where are we going, Jordan?
I'm gonna sneak across the street.
Jordan, I'm
I
worried.
got you, but
You got...
Agnes corner.
Oh! Get him, Jordan! Get him! Get
I'm
him!
on your team. I
Oh,
joined red.
He's on our team, Jordan. He's on our team. Oh, Jordan! Jordan, I got shot!
I got him. Don't worry.
No, I'm dead, Jordan. I'm dead.
Jordan's here to
You open the safe, Jordan. I got you. I got your back. He's here. He's here. Water Charizard's here. Oh, Jordan!
No!
Jordan!
No! Grab the bomb.
Chuck him.
Chuck it over.
Oh! Oh no! Jordan! No!
This is it! This is the last gold! I got it! I'll bring it back! Jordan, what do you want me to do?
Drop the gold! Drop the gold now! Drop it! Oh.
Oh!
We did it for Jordan!
Yeah! Yeah!
Grab the one that looks like an angel.
Click that button, and then what else, Jordan? Now I click the picture. Oh, I'm an angel now, Jordan.
Yes, yes, you are. You're beginner angels. I love this place. It has vibrant colors. We're all good angels.
I have gathered more angels for Jordan.
Play with you now, guys.
Do that, diddly-bee-bop, boop. Do-da-do-ba-lip-boo.
What are you doing?
Who is this intruder?
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Who is this intruder?
Surround him, circle him. One of us. One of us.
Now it's time to go to the hotel.
Is the hotel part of being an angel?
Yes, you live in a hotel. Come up to the tippity top. There are 2 rooms for people. Pick your rooms. What do you think God is?
I personally don't think he's real, but yeah, for you, what it is.
You don't believe in God? I think God is a cloud. I think he has a cloud with a halo over him. Since clouds are up in the air and that's where he is. I'm Jordan, okay? Can you hear me, Simon?
Oh, I can hear you. Hi, Jordan. You're sitting in front of me. I thought that was someone else sitting in front of me.
No, I would know why you can't tell we're all angels.
If you could say one thing to everyone in the world, Jordan, what would it be?
Okay. It would be if people hate you, don't hate them. Do good, die great.
All right, so that video of VR Chat Jordan has been viewed over 9 million times. There are shirts, people are getting tattoos of that philosophy on their bodies. He is more than a meme. This kid is a movement. And this is Jordan wearing his shirt. So there you go. So just to finalize, in closing, do good, die great. Thanks.
Gracias. Excelente. Come on. Por favor. Gracias. Bueno, vamos a pensar algunas preguntas.
Let's think about some questions. How many of you discovered Chat VR today? Most of you. Let's talk a little bit about Chat VR. Let me see if we understood, because we are all discovering Chat VR here. It's a room of VR chat, right? It's a room where people go in with their avatars and they interact.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
But instead of thinking as a VR chat as a room, think of it as the internet, where every website is a space. And now, if I invite you to my website, but we're embodied, the relationship is very different. And that space can be a place to play games. It can be a place to make art. It can just be a place to be social and hang out. I mean, I think we're all trying to figure out, like, what is the future of this medium? And the moment I'm with other people and I can make and share things, it just makes sense. Like, I got so lonely watching 360 videos. It was just the most unappealing experience for me. And the moment I'm in, like, any of these social VR experiences, not just VR chat, but, like, you know, Museum of Other Realities, or, you know, there's other ones that are less successful, like Sansar and AltSpace, but they're much more sanitized. But you really get a sense of people inviting you into their worlds and being with you. And honestly, I think that is, without a doubt, that is the future of this medium. So VR chat is not just a room, it's a whole network. It's the internet as a place.
Okay, ¿preguntas para Daniel?
Any questions for Dan?
Yo sigo mientras.
Let me carry on as people think of their questions. Is there a monetization system? If I'm a creator of any type of stories and I want them to put them in VR chat and I want to interact with people, is there any content monetization system?
Right, so in terms of monetization, I don't believe there is in VR chat right now, but the surrounding tools and ecosystems around it are mature. So with Unity, for example, which is blowing up in popularity because people, little kids, centennials, are seeing VR chat, Twitch, and YouTube videos online. Those people are making money. If you're a popular YouTube or Twitch streamer, you can get paid. I don't know how sustainable that is, but there's an economy there, and some people make a living. Unity is a robust ecosystem as well. There's an asset store where creators can upload their creations. So VR chat's where it all comes together right now, and honestly, like, there's so many challenges around intellectual property and behavior. You know, the big question for the platform is, how is it going to mature into something that makes money? I don't think people know yet. But what I do know is, in terms of being front of train, that is about as front of train as it gets. So it's very far away right now from the back of train ROI. But, you know, we're going to get there. I think it's just a question of how and when.
Okay, y para repasar un poco lo que tú decías.
To review what you were just saying in connection with the avant-garde and the early adopter and so on, can we define the enemy content as avant-garde, and can we define VR film as early adopters?
Yeah.
I mean, the content we have in our cinema.
Yeah, so the enemy is definitely, in my opinion, avant-garde, right? It's impactful, it's experimental, and it's supported by art patronage and people who want to see changes in arts and culture. But it's very far away from what consumers can actually access. Like I have a Vive and I can't see it, to my knowledge. So that's a problem, right? Like it doesn't scale. 360 video was avant-garde and has moved down to the early adopter space, I'd say now. It's democratized. You can publish it to YouTube and Facebook. Every VR headset that ships now can support 360 video. So, if you want to actually consume it as intended, that's about as mature as it's going to get. It's really a question now of consumers caring, right? So eventually, maybe 360 video will move down to mainstream. I don't know if it will, but it's certainly available now to do so.
Ok, a ver, sí, por ahí.
¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo te va?
Hello, how are you? Shall I ask in Spanish?
¿Cuál crees que es el riesgo?
Which is the risk of all this? We see a huge number of kids around the world who play in this world, who have fun in this way. You, from your experience in this medium, what do you think? Which are the risks that are run?
I would just make it akin to the risks of the internet at large, right? So, raising a child in a world of free information, especially when they have a smartphone in their pocket and can access websites, platforms, and information that you might not want them to, has been a challenge for a long time. The VR chat, in my mind, is no different than that. I think the difference is that in a fully embodied medium, things that felt like more innocent or less impactful can be far more traumatizing. And so we're still learning about etiquette and behavior and rules of engagement. And the reason why that VR chat Jordan video is so amazing and why so many people have fallen in love with him is because he inspires goodness in a place that is nefarious, is known for its nefariousness, its offensiveness, its crudeness. And so, I think that you just have to look at how the internet has matured in general. When it first started out, it was popular with, subcultures and it was kind of a rough place. But over time, it matures and it becomes available to other communities that, are able to control and create safety for themselves and use it as a tool for empowerment. But we're not there yet. So it's going to be a while, but I think it will happen.
Me hace acordar,
It reminds me, VR chat reminds me of Second Life. Does it have any similarities with the Second Life where people could meet, that parallel world?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of parallels between Second Life and VR chat. The difference is that Second Life is never a full VR experience. So you always had to interact through a mouse and keyboard, which is very unnatural when it comes to expressing yourself. VR chat, if you're in a Vive, an HTC Vive, and you put feet trackers on, you almost have you basically have full body tracking. So your mannerisms and voice suddenly translate in a way that Second Life could never come close to. The other difference is that now we have YouTube and Twitch.
Te detengo un poco.
Yeah.
¿Puedes explicar
Let me
cómo es
stop
esto del
you.
tracking del
Can you describe this tracking thing of what you put on? I don't think people understood you correctly.
Sure. So
Can you elaborate?
How many people here have heard of the HTC Vive? A handful of you guys. It's probably the most high-fidelity VR tracking system you can buy commercially right now. It's expensive. It probably costs us still, I think, like $500 or $600. You need a very powerful PC to run it. But it is available to you. And the technology that it represents was unheard of for consumers a couple of years ago. That piece we saw from Sundance was a really early version of the same technology. So you can set this up in your house, you have to clear some space and you can move around in a 10 by 10 foot area. And you can actually add additional hardware to it so that it tracks your feet as well as your hands and your head. And your avatar will start to look really convincing. And so as you're in this virtual world, there's degrees of fidelity in how you're represented and how you interact with people. Second Life never had this. So Second Life was always kind of removed to the mouse and keyboard. VR chat allows you to be in that fully tracked, fully immersive place, also be able to be in a mouse and keyboard as well. So there's different types of users in the space at the same time.
Ok, otra pregunta.
Any other questions?
Do you feel there's a contradiction there between you said that this VR chat is the future, but it requires all of this preparation and technology surrounding it, that these centennials, they need immediacy and they need to share whatever they're feeling right now. So how can something that is so far removed from the right now be the future?
Right. So the argument I would make is that VR chat is actually very accessible right now because you can watch it on Twitch and YouTube. So you might not be in VR chat, but you are still experiencing the content and reacting to it. So the actual VR component of it is just a very small subset of the community and of the core experience. It's because it's accessible to all these other platforms that people already use that it's being successful, and that its popularity is exploding. And the challenge we saw with other VR content is that it doesn't have that portability. It's very hard to get it to scale and reach an audience because it doesn't hold up, right? It doesn't carry the value across these other places. So, I think VR chat's going to stay small in terms of the amount of people that can actually use it in VR for now. How and when it gains popularity in that format remains to be seen. But 9 million people watched the YouTube video of VR chat content. So I would argue that it's already reaching a mass audience. It's just not in the way that we thought was going to be the way that VR was going to go at the beginning of Wave 1.
Muchísimas gracias. Un aplauso, Daniel. Thank you so much.
A round of applause.
Excelente. Gracias.